Welcome to Word 1 Part 2. In this class, you'll learn how to format paragraphs. You'll learn how to align text, create indents, create bulleted and numbered lists, change line spacing, and you'll also learn how to use the Page Layout tab to set margins, change page size, and change page orientation. You'll also learn how to create page breaks, how to insert page numbers on each page of a document, how to create a header, which prints information on the top of each page of a document, and a footer, which prints information at the bottom of each page of a document. And then you'll learn how to use the spell check and find and replace features. You'll need to do two things to begin the class. First, you'll want to insert the USB drive, which can also be called a flash drive, into your computer. If you don't have a USB drive, you can save the files to the My Documents folder, but it's preferable if you have a USB drive. That way, when you're done with the course today, you can take the files with you, and you could open those files again on another computer if you wanted to practice the course. You also want to make sure you have Word 2010 open, and your Word 2010 screen should look like mine. A blank document called Document 1 will display. You'll want to make sure that the horizontal ruler and vertical ruler are displaying. If those don't display, you can turn them on by using the View tab. If you do need to turn them on, you would take your mouse, point to the View tab, and then you would make sure there's a check mark in the ruler checkbox. Once you're sure the rulers are on, you'd want to go back to the Home tab. If you need to stop the course while you insert the USB drive and open Word, go ahead and do that and then come back to the class when you're ready to continue. To begin, we're going to create a file based on a template. As we learned in Word 1 Part 1, a template is a pre-formatted document in Word that you can customize for your needs. To create a new template, take your mouse pointer, move it to the top left of the screen to the File tab and click. Then move your pointer to New and click. Next, find the search box in the Office.com Templates area and click. And we're going to go ahead and key Job Search. And then remember, if you make a mistake, you can always hit backspace. Job Search Letter. Once you've typed Job Search Letter, go ahead and press your Enter key on the computer keyboard. And then you'll have some Job Search Letter templates display. I'd like you to open the template called Resume Cover Letter Announcing Your Job Search. If for some reason that does not display on your computer, make sure you've spelled Job Search Letter correctly. Make sure you've spaced between each of those words. If it still doesn't display, it's just fine to open another letter that may display called Letter Requesting Help with Job Search. And finally, if neither of those letters display, you could always stop the course right now. You could search simply with the word letter, and I'm certain you would find a letter that you could then open. As long as you have a letter, you'll be able to complete the projects in this course. Hopefully you are able to find Resume Cover Letter Announcing Your Job Search. And then to open that, you could either double click, or with it highlighted, you can come down and click the download button. I'm going to go ahead and point to it, and I'm going to double click. All right, and there's the letter, and this is a letter based on a template. Templates have placeholders. For example, I'm hovering my mouse over the Your Name placeholder. You can tell it's a placeholder because it has brackets. Placeholders are there so that you can replace the placeholder with your own information. I want you to notice there are placeholders for your address, the recipient's address, the recipient's name in the address, and then there's some other placeholders such as job title and company name. For purposes of this class, we're not going to replace all of the placeholders because that would take a lot of time. If you were using this in the real world, you would need to take the time to replace all those placeholders. But for this class, we're opening this to learn how to use a template, and then we also want some text displayed so that we can learn how to use the paragraph formatting features. So the only placeholders we're going to change today are your name and address, the recipient's name and address, and the recipient's name in the salutation. So to begin, take your mouse, which will display as an I-beam because you're working with text. Click one time. The placeholder becomes highlighted. Remember, when text is highlighted, you can key right over it to replace it. You don't have to press the backspace or the delete key on your computer. So go ahead and type your name. I'll go ahead and type a name here. Click on the next placeholder and replace that. Now, if your typing speed is different than mine, remember that you can always stop the course, catch up, and then come back when you're ready to continue. We'll do city. Make sure you type a comma after city, the state abbreviation, and then make sure you press the space bar 2 times after that state abbreviation and key in the zip code. We're not going to use the phone number or email placeholders. You don't have to use all of the placeholders that display in a template. Let's go ahead and delete those. To delete them, we're going to highlight the placeholders, and then we're going to press the delete key on your keyboard. Move your I-beam to the left of the bracket and phone number. Press and hold down your left mouse button. Drag down till both the phone number and email placeholders are displayed. Once they are highlighted. Once they're highlighted, press the delete key on your keyboard, and those are removed. Let's look at the date area. Notice that in this template, the date has actually been replaced. It's displayed as the current date. Your date will look different than mine. We need to remove the date placeholder. In Word, to delete the date placeholder, you'll have to highlight or select the date placeholder, and you will have to press the delete key twice in order to delete that. So click on it to select it. Press the delete key once. Notice that the word date still displays. Press it one more time. All right, let's go ahead and type the recipient name. And we'll type that as Mr. John Brown. We'll go ahead and type a title. Remember, if you make a mistake, use your backspace key to fix that. Company name. Street address. And finally, city, state, and zip code. Okay, we're almost done replacing the placeholders that we're going to replace in this file. Make a note of this. This placeholder is for recipient name. It's the same recipient name placeholder that was up here. So when you typed Mr. John Brown in this placeholder, it changed the salutation to Mr. John Brown. You don't want to keep it that way, though, because that is not the appropriate business format. The business format should be Dear Mr. Brown. So in this case, we really do not want that placeholder text to display. So we're actually going to need to delete that text, and we're going to need to replace it with Dear Mr. Brown. So I want you to go ahead, highlight all of the text, Mr. John Brown, and the colon after it. Press your delete key, and let's just manually type in Dear Mr. Brown. Okay. Those are all the changes we are going to make to that template today. Let's go ahead and save this information to the flash drive. The quickest way to save a file is to go to your Quick Access toolbar. Go ahead, take your mouse pointer, point it to the Save button in the Quick Access toolbar, click one time, and then you'll be able to go ahead and save the file. Now you want to make sure that you are saving the file to your USB drive. So let's do a little review from what we learned in Word 1 Part 1. This area of the Save As dialog box is called the navigation pane. This displays the different areas that you can save files. In Windows, files are saved to documents unless you select another area to save them to. And in this class, we want to save them to the USB drive. But we need to find where the USB drive is displayed. That is displayed in the computer area. We're going to have to scroll down to find that. So you'll need to take your mouse pointer, scroll down. In the computer area, you'll want to find your USB drive. It is at the bottom of the list of this computer area. My USB drive is actually called USB drive. Your USB drive will be called whatever the name of the manufacturer is. I also want you to notice that my USB drive is labeled with the letter G. Yours may be labeled with a different letter. So you need to find that USB drive, and you need to take the mouse, which displays as the hand icon, and click one time. This will then allow us to save to the USB drive. You want to make sure that's highlighted. And if you took Word 1 Part 1 and you use the same USB drive, you'll see the files we saved in Word 1 Part 1. Those are calendar and invitation letter. Now, let's look at the file name. Remember that Word is always going to give our file a file name based on the document. Remember that you want file names to be very specific so you can find them again, but you want them to also be as short as possible. So letter announcing your job search is really much too long of a file name. So we are going to go ahead and change this to include just the most important words. And so we want the words letter and job search to be in here. So we're going to call it job search letter. Let's do a little editing. Go ahead, if you will, take your I-beam, move it to the right of the word your, highlight from your all the way to the left over to letter, press your delete key. Now it says job search. Let's click after the H, press space, and add letter. So we've just edited that to read job search letter. And if you wanted to, you could even make job search letter with capital letters for each word. For now, we're just going to keep it in lowercase. All right, so we're saving it to the USB drive, and we're calling it job search letter. And then to complete this process, we'll click the Save button. If you get another message before you return to the document, just take your mouse pointer and click OK. And so now we have a document called Job Search Letter. All right. Let's learn how to format paragraphs. If you scroll down, you'll notice that we have 3 paragraphs in this portion of our letter. This is called the body of the letter. Paragraph alignment is something that can be changed quite easily in Word. And paragraph alignment basically means how the edges of the paragraph are oriented on the page. You have a left margin on this side of your document, and you have a right margin on this side of the document. By default, and that means the settings that are set when the program is installed on your computer, by default, paragraphs are always left aligned, and so you can see they are aligned at the left margin. They are not aligned to the right margin, and sometimes we refer to this as ragged right. They're not aligned to the right margin. I can tell these are left aligned, and I'm going to go ahead and actually click, and I'll have you do the same thing too. Go ahead and take your I-beam and click somewhere in the paragraph I am writing to let you know. And notice, if you go to the paragraph group, this button is highlighted. If I hover over it, this is my Align Text Left button. Sometimes people just call that left alignment. But that's always automatically set in Word documents so that text is left aligned. Text could be changed to center alignment, and I'm not clicking, I'm just hovering my mouse over to demonstrate that. It could be set to right alignment, or it could be set to justify alignment. So let's go ahead and see how the alignment changes when we change the type of alignment. And let's look at some examples of that. Let me show you an example of center alignment. And just keep your job search letter document displayed. I'm going to change my document just to show you an example. Here's an example of a report with a title page, and it uses center alignment. So notice if I click in this portion of the title, the alignment is at center. This is center aligned. Means that it's aligned to the center of the page. It's not oriented to the left margin or the right margin. It's at the center. Also notice if I click in report title, that is also center aligned. And if I keep clicking, and by the way, this is a template, that's why we see these placeholders. If I keep clicking, all of this information is center aligned just on the title page of this document. As you'll notice, if I were to scroll to the beginning of this report and to click on the body text, that returns to left alignment, which is the most commonly used alignment in Word. That gives you an example of center alignment. Returning back to our job search letter, let's go ahead and change the alignment of this paragraph from left, it's at left, to center. When you're changing alignment, you can click in the one paragraph that you want to change, or you can highlight all of the paragraphs you want to change. Let's just practice changing the alignment of this paragraph. Make sure your insertion point is flashing anywhere in that first paragraph. You could click anywhere as long as the insertion point is flashing there. All right, so now let's change the alignment from left. Let's move to center. Notice the difference. Now the text is centered on the page. Let's go ahead and press our undo key right up here. Now let's change the alignment for all the paragraphs to center. So remember, if you're changing the alignment of one paragraph, the insertion point needs to be anywhere in the paragraph. If you're changing it for all three paragraphs, you want to highlight all three of those paragraphs. Okay, so once you have those all highlighted, let's change to center alignment. You see the difference there. Remember, we're just practicing. In a proper business letter, you would never center the body text. But remember, this is just practicing. Where you would use center alignment is the example I showed you of the report where the title page was centered. Or if you were creating a flyer, much of that text might be center aligned. Now, because we know that body text in a document should be left aligned, let's change it back from center to left. So with that all highlighted, let's come back, move your mouse pointer to align text left, which can also be called left alignment, and let's click. All right, another type of alignment is right alignment, and let's keep all these paragraphs selected. Let's go ahead and move our mouse pointer to right alignment and click. Notice the difference. Now that text is aligned to the right margin. It is not all aligned to the left margin. You can really see that here in the second line of this paragraph, in the last line of this paragraph. Right formatting is not used all that often. It is available to you, but it would be used in very specialized situations. So because we know that body text in a letter is generally left aligned, just go back to our left align button and click. And let's look at the last type of alignment. That's called justify. You will go ahead and take your mouse pointer and click. Justify text aligns to the left margin and to the right margin on all lines of a paragraph except the last line. So you'll notice, for example, in this third paragraph, the first two lines are aligned to the left, and to the right, the last isn't. The computer actually adds spaces between words in order to create that type of alignment. Documents where you would find justified alignment would be things like newspapers, newsletters, and brochures. We're going to go ahead and return that to left alignment. So just to review, remember, if you want to change the alignment of one paragraph, click in the paragraph. If you want to change the alignment of more than one paragraph, you'll want to go ahead and highlight the paragraphs you want to change. All right, now when you're done making a change to a document, you should always unselect. So I want you to go ahead, take your I-beam, click in a blank area, and we've unselected that. Now we really don't need to save this job search letter because we haven't made any changes to that. Next, let's talk about indents. A paragraph indent controls the blank space between the paragraph edge and the left and right margin of the paragraph. If you needed to create a report, you may have to include quotes. And if that was the case, you would need to create a left indent and a right indent. Or in a report, if you wanted to make a paragraph stand out, you might want to create a right indent or a left indent. Or if you wanted just one paragraph to stand out in a business letter, you might need to create an indent. Let me show you an example of an indent using another document. So this is a document. This is a document that would be used in a school setting. And this is an example of a quote. Now this quote has both a left and a right indent. Remember, indenting creates blank space between the paragraph and the margin. So here's our left margin. Notice how the other text is aligned to the left margin in these other paragraphs. In this paragraph, there's a left indent. So there's extra space between the left margin and this paragraph. Notice that this information is close to the right margin in these paragraphs. In the indented paragraph, it's pushed in from the right margin. And you can tell when an indent has been created. There are little indent markers up here on the ruler. This shows a left indent has been created, and this shows a right indent has been created. So let's go ahead and create our own indents on our job search letter. All right, so here we are back at the job search letter. Let's say that we wanted to indent this paragraph. And to indent it, we want to create a left indent and a right indent. By the way, sometimes you'll hear people referring to paragraphs that have a left indent and a right indent as a double indent because it has two indents. So if we just want to indent this paragraph, go ahead and click anywhere in the paragraph. Doesn't matter where, as long as that insertion point is flashing. Now, we are going to go ahead and change this by moving from the paragraph group right up here into the paragraph dialog box. Now, to do that, we need to go ahead and move right over here to the very edge of the paragraph group. And if we want to have more features within the paragraph group, by clicking this button, we'll move to the paragraph dialog box. So we'll click that. Here we are in the paragraph dialog box. Now there's a lot of information in here, but what we want to focus on is a left indent and a right indent. And it's most typical to set half-inch left and right indents. So to do that, we'll move to left, and we're going to point to the up arrow, and we're going to click that until it comes to 0.5. And I want you to notice there's a preview here, and this shows me that this paragraph is going to be indented from that left margin. Now we also want to create a right indent. So we're going to go ahead and create that right indent. So make sure left indentation is set at 0.5 inch, half an inch, and right is also at 0.5 inch. Now if you're sure those settings are correct, you'll move down and click OK. Now you have just created what we refer to as a double indent. You will notice on the ruler your left indent marker is at half an inch and your right indent marker is at half an inch. Another method of changing indents is to use the ruler to drag these indicators. Today, though, I've chosen to show you how to change this in the paragraph dialog box because for most people, that's a more straightforward and easier way to change the indents rather than dragging these very tiny markers. But if you find yourself needing to use indents, either in school or the workplace, you certainly could try using the ruler method. All right, so that is a double indent. We've indented from the left and right margin. Next, I'm going to show you how to create a hanging indent. A hanging indent can be used if you want certain text to stand out in your document. For example, we're going to create a hanging indent here in this letter because we want to let people know about an important note inside of this letter, and by creating a hanging indent, it will stand out because it will be formatted differently than any of the other paragraphs. So what I want you to do is go down to the bottom of the last paragraph after the word request and the period, press enter, and then we're going to go ahead and create a hanging indent. We're going to create a hanging indent in the paragraph dialog box, the same one that we used to create the left and right indent. Go ahead, take your mouse, move it to this button on the edge of the paragraph group, and now we're back in the paragraph dialog box. Now notice it doesn't display our left and right indent because that was only for the paragraph that we created that in. It wasn't for the rest of the document. Now we're going to create a special indent. It's going to be called a hanging indent. And all we're going to do is just come there and we're going to choose hanging. So it should read hanging 0.5 inch, and then we'll click OK. Right, now in a hanging indent, the first line of text is indented, and then each line underneath is also indented. So we're going to create a note. So I want you to go ahead and type note, and then type a colon, and find your tab key on your keyboard. That is the key on the top row of letters on the very left. You're going to press tab, and then we're going to go ahead and type a note here. Okay, so in this note, we'll go ahead and say, Mr. Bob Jones indicated that my skill set would be very useful in your organization. And we're just going to use automatic word wrap here. What that means is you're just going to continue to type this, and it will wrap to the next line. Okay? I have worked with him on many projects, and he can certainly give me a great recommendation. And I spelled that wrong. I'm going to use my backspace key. All right, so that's a hanging indent. Notice what that does. It indents the first line after you press the tab key, and then every line underneath indents to that. So you can use that to make certain paragraphs stand out. If you're a student and you need to use reports, your references and citations may need to be formatted as hanging indents also. Now, once again, if your typing speed is a little bit slower than mine, you can certainly stop the course and you can practice this, and then you can come back to the course when you're ready to continue. Okay. Now we're ready to move on to creating bulleted and numbered lists. Another way that you can make text stand out to people is to create bullets or to number a list. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add some text And then we're going to add bullets or numbers to it. And that is the way I would recommend adding bullets and numbers, to type the text in that you want, and then after you're done typing the text, to apply the bullets or numbers. So your insertion point should be flashing after the hanging indent. I want you to go ahead and press your Enter key one time. It's very important to understand that once you have created an indent in a document, such as a hanging indent, the hanging indent formatting is going to continue to the next paragraph unless you turn it off. So we need to turn off hanging indent here. So your insertion point should be flashing under that paragraph with note. To do that, you're going to come up to the paragraph group, click that button on the bottom right. We need to turn the hanging indent off by coming here to None and then clicking OK. That turns that back off again. All right, so now we're ready. We're going to go ahead and create a bulleted list. So if you will, I want you to go ahead and type the following information. I'll type job history, colon, we'll press enter, and we'll put salesperson. We'll press enter one more time. Manager. We'll press enter one more time. And then we'll type hostess. All right, now remember, we are simply practicing these skills in Word. In the real world, if you were typing some type of a letter or you were searching for a job, you most likely would have this job history information on a resume. But remember, for purposes of this class, sometimes we're adding text just because we want you to understand how to format inside of this Word document. Okay, so here we have a list of job history. So to make the job history stand out, salesperson, manager, hostess, you can add bullets. Your bullet button is also up here in the paragraph group. Here it is, right there. Now to use it, we need to highlight the text that we want to bullet. So we're going to highlight that information. And then we're going to go ahead and come up here to this button, and we're going to click. And look what we've done. We've just created bullets. Just like that. And by the way, those bullets are created with a hanging indent that is automatically created. So it's as simple as that. Now, you can change the type of bullet. So if you come up here to the bulleted area, click this drop-down arrow, you can see that you have a bullet library. Now, mine has some customized bullets that we've created in other classes, so yours may not look exactly like mine. But see if you can find the square bullet and click on that. And you'll see that changes from circles to squares. All right, now let's go ahead and unselect that by clicking. All right. Now, let's say we changed our mind and we wanted to number that. We wanted to make that a numbered list. Well, all we have to do is select it. And then in the paragraph group, let's come right up here to numbering and click on numbering. And now that's automatically numbered for us. If you don't like the style of the numbering, you can click the drop-down arrow. And for example, you could change it from a period after the number to parentheses. And we have just changed that. And then when we're done, we would just click to deselect. Just for a little more practice, let's go ahead and change that back to bullets. So let's highlight that. And by the way, notice that the bullets and the numbers, they are never highlighted. Those will change, but you're not able to highlight them when you use your mouse. Let's go over here and change it to bullets. And let's go ahead and change it back how bullets usually display by doing our drop-down arrow and going to the circle or the dot. And there we have a bulleted list. What else could you do to change the formatting of the paragraphs in your document? One thing you can do is you can change line spacing. So the official definition of line spacing, it's the amount of vertical space between lines of text. So for example, if I look at this paragraph, or if you are aware of any associates or friends, the space between each line in this paragraph, which can be called vertical spacing, that's the line spacing. And in Word 2010, the spacing is set at 1.15. Adding space between lines makes a document easier to read, so that's why you will find that many times when people create reports or essays, they set the line spacing to double space to make it easier to read. In a business letter, you would normally just leave it at the default spacing. Let's go ahead and practice changing the spacing from the default, which is 1.5, to 1.5 just to see the difference, and then change it to 2, which can be called double spacing. Now, because this is paragraph formatting, when we make these changes, it will change whatever paragraph the insertion point is currently in, or we can choose more than one paragraph. So let's do this. Let's change all of these paragraphs. So let's highlight all of that. And then to change your line spacing, you're going to come up here to the paragraph group. Now remember, we said the default is 1.15. Let's go ahead and change it to 1.5. See the difference? It's added extra space between the lines. And then let's try another line spacing option. Let's change it to 2.0. All right? And it's easier to read because we've added more space, but in a business letter, that's really too much spacing. So let's go ahead, let's change it back to the default of 1.15, right? Now, on the other hand, where you might find this more practical, let me go ahead and open up the sample report. This is a sample report that it might be used, or there's a type of school report where they may assign it and ask you to use double spacing. Let's just see the difference if we were to highlight this paragraph and if we were to change that from the default of 1.5 to 2. You can see in a report that that text is more easy to read. Let's go ahead back to our letter. Okay, so we are back. And right now, make sure you don't have anything selected. If you do, click in a blank area. And that is called line spacing. Now, there's also something called paragraph spacing. When you press the Enter key, it creates paragraph space. And that's actually measured in points. That's 10 points. Sometimes you might want to change the paragraph spacing. For example, down here in my bulleted list, maybe I want to create a little extra room here between these lines. So to change paragraph spacing, you can highlight what you want to change. Okay? And even though you may think of these as lines, you may not think of those as paragraphs. When you create text, if you press the Enter key to create a new line, it is considered a paragraph. All right, so we've highlighted that. Let's go to the paragraph dialog box by moving up here and clicking the button. Let's go ahead and change the spacing. So right now the spacing after is 12 points. Let's just increase that. Now notice as I use my arrow, I can increase it or I could decrease it. See how it's, and I'm just kind of practicing there. Let's increase it to 18 points. Now it's only going to change this text that I have highlighted. Let's click OK. And do you see there's a slight difference in the space between each of these paragraphs? Let's try it one more time to have a little bit more space. Let's go back up to the paragraph group and click. Let's change that to 24. Okay, and so that will change that spacing between those lines. All right, so let's go ahead and deselect that. And then we really do need to save this file. So to save it, remember the quickest way, come up to your quick access bar and click, and that will save that. All right. Now let's learn how you can add borders and shading to a paragraph to make that stand out, or to paragraphs. So let's go ahead and let's add shading in a paragraph to job history and the bullets underneath it. All right, so let's go ahead and click on that. Now we're going to go ahead and work again in the paragraph group. And the buttons that we're looking for are the shading group, which looks like a little bucket, and the borders group. Let's go ahead and add a border first. To add a border, move to the border button, click on the drop down arrow. Now you have some choices. You could either add a border to the bottom, to the top, to the left, or to the right, or you could add a border to all of the sides, the bottom, top, left, and right. That's called an outside border. So I want you to find outside borders. Click on that. And we've just gone ahead and we have added borders. Now go ahead and click just so you can see what we've done there. And there's our borders. And what if you wanted to add some shading? Well, let's highlight the areas we want to shade. And then our shading button is right up here. It looks like a bucket. Click the drop down arrow so you can see choices. We have lots of different choices. We are today just going to choose a gray. Notice how there's different shades of gray. You want to make sure whatever shade that you choose, you can still see the text inside of it. So we'll go ahead and we'll choose that shading, and then we'll deselect. All right, so it's just a matter of highlighting, and then you can add borders, and you can add shading. All right, now let's go ahead and save that change by going up and clicking on the Save button. Great. All right, so that was formatting paragraphs. You can see the differences that we've made. We've gone ahead and added a double indent. We've added a hanging indent. And then we've gone ahead and added borders and shading to our document. The next thing that we're going to talk about is formatting the page. It has to do with how the page is laid out. For example, if you needed to change the margins, if you needed to change the page orientation, and we'll talk about page orientation because the page can either be in portrait or landscape. Maybe you need to change the paper size. Typically people use letter size paper. Maybe you're creating a document that needs to be on legal size paper. All of those items having to do with formatting the page can be changed using the Page Layout tab. I want you to make sure you have your insertion point at the top of your document, and the quickest way to do that is to use a shortcut key combination. So I want you to find your Control key on the bottom left of the keyboard, press and hold it down, and then find the Home key. The Home key is one of the 6 keys above the arrow keys on your keyboard. So you're going to press and hold Control and then tap Home, and you'll be up at the very top. You'll see your insertion point flashing at the top of your document. All right, so let's go ahead and learn how to change margins. Click on the Page Layout tab, and we're going to be focusing here on the Page Setup group. If you click the arrow next to margins, you will see that there are some quick ways to set the margins. Now on this template, notice that they've actually set custom margins. Normal margins in a Word document are 1 inch on the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. Sometimes that's just called 1 inch all around. So let's say we wanted to change these to normal margins. Now this should change the way this looks a little bit. Let's go ahead and click. Did you notice that that document, the layout of the document changed somewhat? Because we have changed the placement of the document from the top, bottom, left, and right margins. So let's click margins again. Narrow is not used very often. Narrow may be used if you're possibly trying to fit information on one page and maybe some of it's flowing to the next page, let's see what narrow margins look like. I know. As you can see, there's really not much space there at all. There's only 1/2 inch margin. That would really not work well in this type of document. So let's go ahead to margins and let's change it to moderate. Okay. That would be more appropriate for what we're working with. There's some other options in here, but for now, instead of looking at all the options, let's go down to custom margins, just so that you can see you can set margins any setting that you want. So now they're set to top 1, bottom 1 inch, left 0.75 inch, and right 0.75 inch. So let's say that we have decided we actually want the top and the bottom margins to be changed. Now we could change them either by clicking the arrows, or we could go ahead and type something in. Go ahead and click that arrow if you've been clicking with me. Bring it back to 1 inch. Let's say we wanted to change the top and the bottom margin to 1.25 inches. Go ahead and take your I-beam, click after the 1, type 0.25, and then do the same thing here for bottom. Add point, and when I say point, I mean period. So we refer to that as 1.25, but we're actually using the period to change that. All right, now once you've changed it, click OK. And there we have it. That's how you change your margins. Page orientation. Page orientation can either be set to portrait or landscape. Now our document is currently in a portrait orientation. You may find yourself needing to change the orientation to landscape if you're doing a report and you have some type of a specialized page. So let's say, for example, maybe you've created a table on a page. Maybe you have some type of a graphic and you want that to be displayed because it will lay out on the page better as landscape. So let's try that on this page. If we go to orientation, we're currently at portrait, change it to landscape. Now notice how the page has now been changed. It's been changed to landscape. It's almost like flipping the page. Landscape would typically not be used for a letter. I just wanted to demonstrate that to you, so let's change it back to portrait. Size. Our document is in a letter size. Let's say that you were working in a law office and you created a legal document. You might have to change the size, clicking here, and changing it from letter, which is 8.5 by 11, to legal, which is 8.5 by 14. So try that, but then let's switch it back. And now there are some other features in here, but we're not going to use those now. So the most important ones for you to understand under page setup are margins and orientation and then size. And remember, those are found by clicking the page layout tab and then going to the page setup group. Creating page breaks. When you create documents, when Word gets to the bottom margin, which would be down here, when it reaches the bottom margin, it will automatically create a second page. Now notice if I look here in my status bar, my letter is page 1 of 1. It's only long enough to fill one page, but many documents are longer than one page. And we're going to go ahead and change this so that it's a 2-page document so we can practice inserting page breaks, inserting page numbers, and then inserting headers and footers so that after this class you would be prepared, if you work with longer documents, to know how to work with those features. So we are actually going to create what we call a hard page break. That means that Word does not create a page break because the document is not moved far enough down the page to need to open a new page, but instead you create your own page break. So in this case, we are going to go ahead and create a page break at this point of the letter. The word note is actually going to begin our second page. So to create a page break, you need to click where you want the new page to start. So we're going to go ahead and take our I-beam, click before the N in Note, and then we're going to go ahead and insert a page break. There's a shortcut key for creating a page break, and this is the quickest way to create a page break. The shortcut is pressing and holding your control key, which is at the bottom left of the keyboard, and then pressing and holding the enter key at the same time. So I want you to press and hold the control key and then press the enter key. And you have now just created a page break. So you can see now it says we're on page 2 of 2. Now this document has what's called a header that's already been created. So that's information that automatically adds information such as name, date, and page number. We can see that. You can see it on page 2. You scroll up. You can see it's not on page 1. Many times, headers and footers do not appear on the first page of the document. They appear on the second page and then any page after. Now, just to practice this, let's say that we have decided we actually want to create a third page. So, we want this note information to be on the second page. We would like job history to be on the third page. So let's create a page break there. Let's go ahead and click before the J in job. And I'm going to show you an alternative method. The quickest way to create a page break is the control key and then enter. But another way that you can create a page break, if you're still here in the page layout group under page setup, you can press and hold down on breaks and you can click page. Now we have 3 pages. See, page 3 of 3. And notice that on that page, it automatically numbers it. We'll eventually come and add the date, and then it has the name of the recipient. So here we go. We still have that on page 2, but it does not show up on page 1 because that would interfere with the address. All right, so that's how you would create page breaks. Remember, you would typically use that in a longer document, but for purposes of this class, this is the document we have, so we are going to go ahead and practice it on this particular document. And I'm just scrolling through again so you can see. All right, let's go back to the top of the document. The quickest way to do that is to press and hold down your control key and then tap the home key. And now you're sure you're at the top of the document. Let's go ahead and save that by clicking the Save button. Okay, so we've gone ahead and added some pages to that. So let's go ahead and talk next about adding headers and footers to a document. Now on this document, because it's a template, the headers and footers have already, a header has already been created. So a header is information that shows up on every page of the document. Sometimes it does not show up on the first page because people opt not to have it on the first page. But just to review, on a template, you may have a header display. So this header indicates the recipient's name. It has a placeholder for date, and it tells us the page. This is page 2. Let's look at it down here on page 3. It looks exactly the same, except the page number is different. Now, we really don't want a date placeholder. We actually want the date here. So we want to go ahead and edit this header. And I want you to notice that the header is a lighter color. Now, when you actually printed that, the header would not be a lighter color. The reason it displays this way is so that you as the computer user know that this is not part of the regular document. This is the header. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and double click into that date placeholder. And now you can actually see that we're using the header. See how there's a dotted line in the header, and now the header text becomes darker and the regular text in your document becomes lighter. So we've moved from the regular edit mode to the header edit mode. So let's go ahead and change the date to the current date. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight that date, and then we'll go ahead and we'll type in the current date. You can type in your current date. Right? And then you'll just click outside of it. And then you have the date. Now, I want you to notice when you're working in a header and footer, the Header and Footer Tools Design tab shows up. And it's very important when you're done editing that header, or if you're editing a footer, which we'll do here in a couple of minutes, it's very important that you make sure you close the header and footer when you're done so you can go back and edit your regular document. So what I want you to notice, because you're in the Header and Footer Tools Design tab shows up. I want you to move to this X, close the header and footer. Notice we don't have a header on the first page. We have it on the second page. There's the date we just put in. And then it also shows up on the third page. And since that's a change that we've made, let's go ahead and save that. Okay, now, what if you wanted to create your own header and footer in a document? The reason the header and footer was created in this document is because it was a template. Let's go ahead and let's create another template, and within that template we'll create a header and a footer. Let's go ahead and do that with a calendar. So go ahead to create a document based on a template. Click on the File tab, come down and click on New, and then let's go ahead and type calendar, and press Enter. And I'd like you to find the 1-month basic calendar and a year. In fact, because we're doing headers and footers, let's do this one instead. Let's do the 12-month basic calendar and a year. And then it's going to ask you what year you want to create the calendar. Yours may be different than mine. I'm going to click OK. And at this next box, click OK again. And there's our calendar. And we can see there's page 1 of 12 because there's 12 months. So here's January. If I scroll down, there's February. Like I said, you might have a different year. But I want you to go ahead and make sure you're at the top of the document. Your insertion point should be flashing before January. All right, so let's say that you wanted to create a header with your name and a footer with the page number at the bottom. Now remember, the last document we were using was a letter template. It already had a header created. This one we'll have to create our own. So to create your own header and footer, you'll click the Insert tab. And then we'll begin with header. So you're going to go ahead and click on header. And we're going to go ahead and type your name on the right-hand side. So you'll click right there. Now, as soon as you do that, remember the text in your regular document becomes faded because you're not working on editing your document. You're working on editing the header. So you're going to go ahead and type your name in there. All right. And then let's go ahead and add one other piece of text here to this header. Now, headers are set up that information can be keyed on the left, the center, and the right. And that is because they have programmed what we call tabs. Up here, this upside down T is called a center tab. This one at 6.5 inch, it looks like a backwards L. That's called a left tab. What I want you to do, find your tab key on your keyboard. Remember, that's the button that's to the left of the Q on the top row of letters. I want you to press tab once. That takes you to the center. And I want you to press it one more time. That brings you over to the right. And I want you just to type work calendar. Now, this is going to show up on every page of this document. But before we close this, remember you can have information at the top of every document. That's called a header. And then you can have information at the bottom of every page of the document. That's called a footer. Now, when we're working in either a header or a footer, this Header and Footer Tools Design tab shows up. We currently are in the header. We can tell that. We can see we're at the top of the page. We can see this header tab. We're going to go ahead and go to the footer. We're going to move our pointer to go to footer and click Here we are down in the footer. Now there's no information in that footer. Let's go ahead and let's add a page number to that footer. So we're going to go ahead and click the drop-down arrow. Now if you were only adding page numbering, you could use these features up here. But because we're going to add something else to the footer, I want you to move here to current position. That just means wherever your insertion point, that's where the number is going to be, and then you'll click Play Number. Now it's added a 1 because we're on page 1, but that number will update according to what page you're on. So if you were on page 5, it would add that number to page 5. Now remember we talked about the tabs inside the header that move you to different parts. There's also tabs in the footer. I want you to press the tab 2 times. And let's put the name of the company. We'll put ABC Company. All right. You may have to practice a little bit with headers and footers to really understand them, but headers and footers are very useful because they save so much time. Imagine if you went in and typed the page number and the company name on every page of this calendar. Now remember, when you're working in header and footers, you're editing the headers and footers. It's very important you close out of the header and footer so you can go back and work with the regular parts of the document. So you want to come up here, click Close Header and Footer. All right, now let's look. There's our header. There's our footer. It shows up on every page. I'm scrolling to February. Notice that the page number changes. It'll just take some time to scroll through, and you'll see how that works. And then after you've scrolled through, let's go back to the top of the document. The quickest way to get to the top of the document is pressing the Control key on your keyboard and then the Home key. And now, since we're talking about that, we've talked about how useful the Control Home is because it gets you to the top of the document. If you ever need to quickly get to the bottom of the document, make a note that the shortcut key for that is the Control key, and then the End, E-N-D, the End key, that's right below the Home key. Try that. So it's Control End, E-N-D. And if I want to go back home, it's Control Home. So make sure you end up back home. All right. Let's go ahead and, let's save this. Okay, so let's click on our Save button. Now, in this work session, we were saving to the USB drive. So we're still here at the USB drive, but we want to change the file name. And I just want you to change this to header space footer calendar, just so you'll remember this is the calendar where you created headers and footers. So header, footer, calendar. Get all that typed in, and then remember to complete this process, you'll click the Save button. I want to create another calendar, and in this calendar, I want to show you how to just insert page numbers, because if all you want to do is insert page numbers, it's a much quicker process than having to go to Insert Header and then Insert Footer. So let's create another yearly calendar. Take your mouse pointer, click on File, click on New, and come here to your search box and type calendar. And I just spelled that incorrectly. So, if you spell a word incorrectly, you're not going to get the templates you want. So remember, you can always fix that spelling, and now those will come up for me. All right. Let's go back to this 12-month basic calendar and click OK. Click OK again. All right. All we want to do here is we want to insert page numbers. We want those page numbers to be at the bottom in the center. To insert page numbers, take your mouse, click on the Insert tab, come over here to Page Number, click the drop-down arrow, and you have the two choices that most people usually make are the top of the page or the bottom of the page if they're just inserting a page number. So let's go to the bottom of the page. Now look at your choices. You could do a plain number on the left, the right, or the center. Now I also wanted to show you that you can actually dress this up a little bit. You can choose bold numbers. You could add a graphic line. So I'm going to choose brackets. See how nice that is? Kind of dresses that up a little bit. Put your page numbers in there, but it also gives you some graphics. Now, because I've inserted this at the bottom of the page, it's considered a footer. If you are ever working in your document, you see the word footer and you see dotted lines, and the rest of your document is dimmed out, remember you're in that footer editing mode. You have to close that to get back to actually editing your document. So you're going to close that. Okay, let's see what happened here as a result of inserting that page number. Page 1. Page 2. I wonder if page 12 numbered. Well, let's go quickly to the bottom of the document. Remember your shortcut key? Press and hold your control key, tap end. You're now on page 12. Let's head back up quickly to the top of the document. Press and hold your control key and tap home. And you're now at the top of the document. Now, let's go ahead and save that, and let's call that calendar page number. To save it, let's go up to your quick access toolbar, click save. Remember, it's saving to your USB drive, so you're going to go ahead and type calendar page number. All right. Once you've got that typed in, click your save button. And up here in our title bar, it displays calendar page number. Now we're done using this, so you can click the File tab and you can click Close. We're done using the header footer calendar. You can close that, File tab, and click Close. And let's leave the job search letter open for now. All right, the last part of the class, let's talk about proofing your document. It's very important before you print your document to always make sure you do a spell check and also to do a grammar check. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open a document that you currently do not have. I just am going to use this for demonstration purposes. This is a letter I've created, and I purposely have put spelling errors in here. And I want to demonstrate to you how I would quickly proof this document to make sure everything's correct. Now, some of this we talked about in Word 1. If you have spelling errors in your document, the program will indicate that to you with red wavy lines. So here in this document, Smith is misspelled. Walnut is misspelled. And there's other words that are misspelled. So the red wavy line means that there's a spelling error. You may also notice green wavy lines. That means there's a grammar error. So for example, this says our records shows. That's not grammatically correct. And the computer's going to show us how to fix that. Now something else you may see, you may sometimes see a blue line underneath a word. And that's called a format consistency indicator. So what that means is the computer believes that what you've typed is inconsistent with the document. Now, it doesn't mean the word is spelled incorrectly, but if I read that, it says, our record shows that you are one of OUT's most active clients. Now, that is supposed to say one of our most active clients. It's not a misspelling, so the computer is thinking that that's not appropriate there and that you should change that, but you're the one who has to make a decision about that. Now, do you remember we had talked about one way to fix any of these words that have these wavy lines underneath them is to do a right click and then look at a recommended list and change things. So I could, for example, if I know that Smith is spelled incorrectly, I could take my I-beam, I could right click and choose Smith, and that's fixed. But a quicker way, instead of going through each one of these and clicking, is to do a spelling and grammar check. And even if you have taken the time to go through and click on the wavy lines, you should always, before saving a document for the last time, the final version, you should always do a spell check on it. So to do that, you want to make sure your insertion point is at the top of the document. Now remember, your shortcut to move your insertion point to the top of the document is the Control key and the Home key. And then from there, you're going to go ahead and take your mouse and click on the Review tab. And like I said, for purposes of this class, this is just for demonstration because I know you don't have this particular document. But if you wanted to, you could, after I demonstrate this to you, you could stop and you could return to this part and you could key a letter in with these same spelling and grammar errors and you could practice this. Or you can just watch this a few times just to make sure you understand how this works so that you can use it when you create your own documents. At any rate, I'll click Review, Spelling and Grammar. Okay, now what it's detecting, not in its dictionary, walnut is not a word it recognizes, so it's going to give me some suggestions. Look at the first suggestion, walnut. That is correct, and usually it does a pretty good job of figuring out what should be the correct spelling, but I want you to notice that sometimes it gives you more than one suggestion. So if the first suggestion wasn't the one you wanted, you might have to click on another one, but walnut is the one I want. So I've got some different buttons over here. I'm going to go ahead and click Change. And that will change that from the misspelling to the correct spelling. Change All would be used if you had a certain word that you had keyed more than one time. Let's say you had keyed walnut 3 times in this document and you knew that each time you typed it incorrectly. It's W-A-L-N-E-T. If you click Change All, it would change all of the instances of walnut that you had misspelled. I'm just going to click Change. Okay, now this is the one that's a format inconsistency. It's saying it doesn't think the word out should be there, and it's correct. It should be our, so we're going to click Change. Here's another word. I've spelled achievements incorrectly. I'm going to click Change. And then here it says Spelling and Grammar, Subject-Verb Agreement. Our record shows that you are one of our most. This is suggesting that it should actually say our records show, and that is correct. So I'm going to change that. And finally, here we have an error. Annual is spelled incorrectly. So we're going to change that. Now it says the spelling and grammar check is complete. So I can click OK. If I scroll back up, I can see that all those wavy lines are gone. Now, it's always a good idea to make sure you read over the letter anyhow, because you cannot count on the computer to catch every error. Sometimes there might be something there that you are going to need to proof and you're going to need to change. And we should also talk about that sometimes the computer will not recognize a word, but it actually is a correct word. So let's say that we are going to send this letter to Mrs. Mary Smith in Circleville, but then we realize that actually we need to change that city and her zip. We keyed that incorrectly. So let's say that Mrs. Mary Smith, she actually lives in, we'll say, Nelsonville. And the computer does recognize that, so there's no red wavy lines underneath that. Let's say we try one more thing. Let's say she actually lives in Nelsonville spelled that way. All right, this is what I was trying to get the computer to do. Now, let's imagine that Mrs. Mary Smith actually lives in a place called Nelsonville, and this is the correct spelling for this particular city. Well, the computer's not going to recognize it. So let's say that we know that there's a place called Nelsonville spelled this way. It's not in the computer's dictionary, so it's not going to recognize that. So if I go back up to the top and I do this spell check one more time, what I want you to notice, it's saying Nelsonville's not the correct spelling. You should change it to Nelsonville. But in this case, there just happens to be a city with kind of a strange spelling of Nelsonville. And we know that's correct. We actually want to add it to the dictionary so that the next time it will not stop and find that. So we're going to click Add to Dictionary and click OK. All right. Now remember that Nelsonville usually would be spelled with an O, but I'm just giving you an example there sometimes there are exceptions to the rule that you have to add to your own dictionary. All right, so that's proofing your document. When you're finalizing your document, you may also sometimes need to replace one word with another word. So let's change this letter just a little bit, and let's say that we want to add something here. We know that we're inviting this person to an annual dinner. Let's type, we are celebrating our 3rd anniversary. And just so that she knows what this letter is all about, I'm going to go ahead and add 3rd anniversary here. Okay, so we have 3rd anniversary 2 times. All right, so let's imagine that actually once we've saved this letter, I'm going to go ahead and save it, we realize that it's actually our 4th anniversary. Whoever keyed this, they keyed it wrong. So we need to change this 3rd to 4th and this 3rd to 4th. Now we know enough about editing now that we could pretty easily do that. We could double click, we could highlight those words and change them. But what if the word 3rd was in our document 20 times and we needed to change it to 4th? It would take a really long time to change that. So when you find yourself needing to change many words from one word to another word, you can use the Find and Replace feature. Now you should always go to the top of the document before doing that. So you should press Control Home. And then your Find and Replace feature is actually contained in the Home tab. So take your mouse, click on the Home tab. You have to go way over here and click on Replace. And it's going to ask you what word do you want to find, what do you want to replace it with. The insertion point's flashing and find what, so we're going to type 3rd, and spelling is very important. It does not matter what case it is. It will find it whether it's an uppercase or lowercase. So I would encourage you just to go ahead and type it in lowercase. Find what, 3rd, replace with 4th. Once again, remember spelling is very, very important. All right, so we want it to replace any of the word 3rd with the word 4th. So we'll click Replace All. Word has completed its search of the document and has made 2 replacements. That's exactly what we wanted it to do. So we'll click OK. And you can actually see very quickly it's changed 3rd to 4th. Now we're done with this dialog box, so we'll go ahead and we'll click Close. So that's a very basic find and replace that you can use to very quickly change things that you need to change and to save yourself some time. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do, well, let's go ahead and I will save this. All right, and then I'm going to close that. I'm done with that. And we still have our job search letter. So let's talk about one last thing. Okay, so you're all done with your document, and it's time to print it. To print, go ahead and take your mouse, move it to the File tab, and then click Print. And I want you to notice that you'll get a preview of your document. Now remember, in this particular document, we added page breaks. It's actually 3 pages. It tells us it's 1 of 3. We hit come down here, press that arrow. Now we can see page 2. Finally, we can see page 3, and we can preview the whole thing. Remember, we can see the header up there. Remember, we changed the date on that. Now here's your your Zoom control down here. So if you're having a hard time reading this at 54%, and the reason it's at 54%, when you're looking in this preview, you're really looking at the layout of the page or how it's going to print instead of focusing on the text. When you're focusing on the text, it's when you're in the regular view of Word. But at any rate, if you wanted to change this and make it bigger, see how you have the plus sign down here to make it bigger, or you can take this little bar and move it. Either one is fine. I'm actually going to bring mine back to about 50%, where it was before. We'll do it at 54%. All right, so before you print, let's look at some of the options you have under settings. The default option would be to print the entire document, all the pages. So it would print 3 pages of this document. If you click the drop-down arrow there, you could print just the current page. So I happen to be on page 3. If I wanted just to print that page, I would click Print Current Page, and that changes here in the settings. The other option would be print a custom range. What if I only want to print page 2? I could type 2, or I could print 2, I could put a comma and then put 3. That means I want to print pages 2 and 3. All right? Now, if you had a longer document, this would not work with this document. Let's say you had a 20-page document and you wanted to print pages 11 through 15. In that case, you would type 11. You would use a dash up here on the top row of your keyboard, which stands for through 15. That will be 11 through 15. That won't work on this document, but you may find yourself working with longer documents where you'd want to do that. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and make sure mine's back at print all pages. Your letters and portrait orientation, which that's where we would like to keep this, but if you wanted to, you could change it to landscape. Remember, that flips your page. And we're just going to keep this at letter. We don't need to change margin settings. We already checked that earlier. And here we have some options. How many sheets per page? Generally, you're going to do 1 page per sheet, but there's options there that you could change it. Now, if you happen to be somewhere, let's say in an office setting, where you may have a choice to print at more than one printer, maybe there's a black and white printer and maybe there's a color printer. So you can change sometimes where you want to print to. So if I click my drop-down arrow, I have some different choices where I could print. Now I'm going to leave mine here at HP LaserJet. It's also very important to know that by default, you are printing 1 copy. If you wanted to, you could change that. So if maybe I need 5 copies, I could go ahead and change it to that. Now I can either use my up and down arrows, or I could simply type the number, so I'll bring it back to 1. Now if you actually are at a computer today that you can print from, you can try this. You might just want to try the default settings, which are just to print all the pages, but you would simply, to complete the printing process, click Print, and then it will go ahead and it will print. And I don't know if you can hear, I have a printer right by where I'm recording, and I actually have some papers coming out now. So it's going ahead and printing 3 pages. All right, so you are now able to use Word to do many functions if you've taken Word 1 Parts 1 and 2. You can create documents from blank documents. You can create documents from templates. You can cut, copy, and paste. You can change the formatting of characters by adding things like bold, italic, and underline. You can change paragraph settings such as alignment, indents. Remember, you also learned, if we scroll down, how to create bullets and page numbering, how to add borders, how to add shading. You have learned how to edit headers that are inside of templates. You have also learned by opening a calendar template how to create your own headers and footers and how to insert page numbers. You've learned how to do a spell check, and you've learned how to do a find and replace, and finally you've learned to print. All right, so because we're finished, let's go ahead and make sure all of the documents we've used are closed. I always tell people when before you close, make sure you save your documents. So let's click Save just to make sure we saved our final changes. And then to close the documents, let's go to the File tab and click Close. I have more documents open than you do, so when you go to File and Close, you may end up in Word with a blank gray screen. I have a few more documents than you do, so I'm going to continue my closing process. I'm going to keep going. But what you want to do, you want to make sure you have all the documents closed in Word and all the changes saved. And then you'll end up in Microsoft Word with a gray document. Now, when you're at this point, you have 2 choices. You could come up here to the X. It will turn red, and you could close Word. Or the method I'm going to use today, I'm going to click on the File tab. I'm going all the way down here to Exit and clicking. And then that brings you back to your desktop. Now remember, you have saved information on your flash drive, and you want to use the proper procedure to remove that flash drive. To do that, you're going to come over on the right side of your taskbar, find the tiny up-pointing arrow for Show Hidden Icons, and then I want you to go ahead and find the Safely Remove Hardware indicator there. It's very tiny, but it has a little green check mark. You're going to click that. You then want to go ahead and click Eject. And when it says Save to Remove Hardware, you can go ahead and you can take your USB drive out. Remember, when you use USB drives, don't leave it in the computer. It's very important to remember to take it with you. Thank you for attending Word 1, Part 2, and we look forward to working with you on other My Recovery Works classes.